I see we have a quorum by what I can see on my screen.
We do. I see everybody in except Dan Cody. So we've got everybody else. Oh, Dan just joined us. So let's give him just a second to get himself plugged in and turned on.
Well, and since the gang's all here, well, we'll give him a minute to get plugged in, I guess.
Yeah, I have limited video right now, but Dan, if you're all connected, if you want to just unmute and say, hey.
I'm here.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
All right. Then we will call this meeting to order. We have a full committee. Our first item of business is the minutes of April 26th, 2021.
This is Carrie Scheffner. I'll move approval of the minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second. This is Dan.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to the minutes? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the April 26 minutes are approved. Item number 2 is Pleasant View Road Reconstruction Amendment number 1 to the Agreement for Design Engineering Services.
Right. So we've had, well, it's probably going on a couple of years now, design work going on for this is the final design services with Strand, and they've been accumulating some changes to the scope. And at this point, they propose just catching up with a lot of them. So it's a bit of a laundry list. I don't know if you want to go to the attachment and look at anything in particular, but the main points, I think I just kind of summarized in these bullets on the screen.
The only question I have relates to the soil borings. So
Okay.
what happened there? You're changing companies and haven't there been soil borings at this point in time?
There are now, right? We hired CGC by a separate agreement. The
Yeah.
city directly hired them. So they're working with Strand, but not for Strand. Strand had included in their original scope of work PSI Incorporated. And just for a generic number and depth of borings, which turned out not to be indicative of what we actually needed for a scope. So rather than modifying Strand's agreement for their subconsultant scope of work changes, we just started over with a whole new agreement for what we actually did want.
Okay. So they're already under contract and their contract is being budgeted or has been budgeted.
Separate from this, right? Yep, exactly.
But when there was an amendment to this contract that reflected the fact that the separate soil boring item came out of this contract with
PSI.
with PSI, right?
Right.
So that was a significant credit.
Yeah.
Exactly. They
Right.
took that out, which makes the whole thing look like it's not a very big dollar thing. but the lion's share of that is because there was a fairly significant credit by taking their subcontract work out.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just look at the dollars, it's really misleading. It's a bigger amendment than that.
Anyone else have any questions regarding this item? I had one, which is a minor one that will show my ignorance to some extent. What is a soldier pile?
I don't know that I have a really good answer, but the way I see it as basically not sheet piling, like an I-beam, right, driven into the ground with fill in between it. So like concrete panels between steel columns, effectively.
Mm-hmm. Like the roadside sound barriers.
Yeah, you see those, right? Except this is loaded on the backside, but yeah.
And I didn't know what it was either. Google that I just checked says a soldier pile is a common retaining wall strategy in which H-shaped steel beams or piles are drilled deep into the earth at regular intervals, usually 2 to 4 yards apart, known as lagging walls. So it doesn't sound like it's all that different from other pilings that we've seen in the past, but
Used differently.
yeah. Okay.
So those things that we just left in the ground down on Terrace Avenue and cut off at the sidewalk level or 3 feet below the sidewalk were soldier piles.
Right. Yep.
All right, thank you for that.
I had one question. The last bullet point, was that just something that wasn't anticipated in the beginning, or why is that now being added?
Oh, yeah. Well, number one, the golf course stuff, I think they weren't really envisioning the degree to which they were going to go onto the golf course with ponds and with the roundabout and everything. So they knew there'd be some work, but not to the degree that they were going to have to relocate holes along the roadside there. So that was part of it. And then the second part of it came up much more recently, where DOT actually approached us and said, we'd like to coordinate a project with your project to take care of some safety issues at the intersection, which included the rail crossing of our spur line there. And so since they're funding the lion's share of that, that's where we took that on, but it takes plan coordination then between our project and the state's project, and that they couldn't do. So it's extra work. It's some extra work for us, but it's a bigger project now, most of which is funded by WISDOT because of it.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or discussion?
I guess I had one question. They had to add 2 retention basins next to the golf course.
Right.
Prepare designs and drawings over 3 stormwater detention basins to address volume and sediment control needs. Add 2 basins adjacent to golf course. Well, it's interesting. Was that just missed, or what change drove that?
I don't know if it was just because the location of these things hadn't been pinned down, if they thought they would all be somewhat near South Pond instead of along the golf course. But yeah, the flip side of the issue is that until fairly recently, Gary Huth was our project manager, and I took over after he retired. So I don't know all of the details of what happened when, but that's my understanding, is that they weren't figuring on doing as much work, not enough to relocate holes anyway. And that came up later.
Further questions or discussion?
This is Robert. It's not really a question, just so everybody knows. This Herford Norby Golf Course Architects, my understanding is they're doing the lion's share of anything that deals with the golf course, but that obviously, the architects dealing with Pleasant View Road construction just need to make sure that they're communicating with the golf course architects. So, I guess I just want to make it very clear that the Strand Associates is not really designing the golf course or anything like that. They're just making sure that anything that they change is not going to be adverse to what the golf course is trying to do. And so, yeah, I just want to make it very clear that there's 2 separate groups here. One group working with the golf course itself, and one group working nearby the golf course and needing to make sure that we don't mess something up.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I would say, yeah, Strand is designing grading and ponds on the golf course in easement areas, but we're not designing anything about how the golf course plays. So none of the greens, fairways, any of those relocations, that's all just being coordinated. So we're sure that at the end of the day that the grading and drainage actually work together.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Sean.
And ideally, when I'm out golfing, someone on the sidewalk won't get hit with a golf ball. That's
It's a good goal.
the big challenge. Yeah.
Sure.
Further discussion or further questions? This is Carl. I'd like to make a motion to recommend that we recommend the approval of the amendment 1 to the contract. All right, there is a motion to recommend to the Finance Committee and the Common Council an amendment to the Strand contract not to exceed $5,800. Is that what I understood you to say, Carl? I think so. Is there a second to the motion?
This is Robert. I would second Carl's motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation to the Finance Committee and the Council. Item number 3, Sean, is amendment to the traffic control ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
was someone saying something? I'm sorry.
I'm just waiting to hear an explanation, see if my question gets answered.
Oh, okay.
Me too.
Sorry I interrupted.
Sure. This really started with a question about whether folding stop signs should be in the same ordinance as permanent stop signs. And they shouldn't. So our assistant city attorney was helping me craft some language to remove our folding stop signs from our permanent stop signs. And then he said, it would make a lot of sense for us to list all of our traffic signal locations then too. So why don't we add that in? And I listed off all of our traffic signal locations. And then looking at the ordinance as we do as we're changing it, he said, well, really yield signs should be somewhat near stop signs instead of, far flung into the ordinance elsewhere. So we rolled yield signs into this brand new section 1503. And then he and I talked, but didn't come to a resolution as to whether we should also include no right turn on red, which is in 1509, because I said, well, it's near intersections. And he said, yeah, but it's not really assigning right of way. It's just a restriction, and I could go either way on that, as could he, I think. So we pulled sort of 3 things together. Well, we pulled 2 things together and invented one, and they're all housed in 1503 if this passes, but we didn't include in a recommendation whether or not we should also include no right turn on red in the same place. And I think one of the arguments against pulling it in here might be that we tend to have no U-turns allowed at intersections, signalized intersections. But we have no U-turns allowed in other locations too, so we can't easily pull that turning restriction into this section without making a mess of things, because they're not all at intersections. But again, we could go either way on the right turn on red anyway.
So item 2, not the 2 traffic signal locations, but the 2 where it says section 1503 parentheses 1. Those locations, you're just removing folding stop signs, those 9 locations.
Right. So we're not going to have this as part of our stop ordinance anymore. That says,
Okay.
These locations you have to stop every time. Because it's simply not true.
When,
Okay, because they're lights. Yeah. Okay.
They're signals. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah.
oh, sure.
Okay. So what was the
Sean-
point about the folding stop signs? I thought you said that you were going to remove the folding stop signs.
Yeah. So these won't be in our stop ordinance anymore. These are folding stop signs that made it into our ordinance as stop signs. But this change would say remove these things
From the
Because they're-
ordinance, but
yeah, because they're really traffic signals instead. Not
yeah, but the folding signs remain.
the
Physically,
folding
they
signs
remain.
will still physically be
Physically
there.
be there. Yeah. I got it.
So
now.
I'm
Thank
also
you.
looking into that because there's a whole separate issue in the MUTCD that suggests that folding stops really can't be placed unless when the traffic signal comes back on, it comes back on in a sequence such that it will just basically stay red until the folding stop is actually folded back up. Otherwise, people might see a green light and a stop sign at the same time, and
Yeah.
that's not good.
Yeah.
So we may have to get rid of our folding stop signs, but and Madison did that long ago, but WISDOT, which controls several of the signalized intersections here in the city, still has folding stops. So I have repeatedly tried calling WISDOT to get an answer on this, and I got a hold of people, but I do not yet have an answer from them. Like, why did they do it?
Maybe they post somebody there that stays with the location until the lights are restored.
My guess is they don't.
No, I wouldn't think so. But that's the only way I could think about it is if it was
Yeah.
a policeman's aide or something, if he had to manually do it or something.
And that's what it would take, I think, is literally a babysitter. So,
Sean, what is,
Sean,
Carrie,
ahead,
you had a
Carrie.
question?
I was just going to ask. So every time we add a signal to, let's say, an intersection that's doesn't have one, we would have to amend this ordinance.
In two locations, right? One, we would take out the stop sign because presumably before we put a signal in, there had been a stop sign. So we would delete another stop sign and then we would add a traffic signal.
Okay.
Mhm.
Sean, that list that is on the screen now is what is that intended to be?
That's a list of our traffic signal locations, the intersections that are controlled by signals and by the city of Middleton.
By the city of Middleton. So all of the ones, for example, with the Beltline interchanges and things of that nature are not controlled by the city of Middleton. Those are controlled by WISDOT.
Correct. Yeah.
So
We
they don't,
have,
they
and
don't
we have,
appear.
yeah, so we didn't write them into our ordinance
Okay.
because they're not controlled by us. There's one controlled by City of Madison at University and Allen Boulevard.
I was going to ask about that one too. That's Madison.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
them, right? Yeah.
All right, I understand that. So then
Make
what
a
is the
motion.
question that you would like the committee to decide whether we want to put in the,
Yeah, so we have stop signs, we have traffic signals, and then this was moving yield signs from 1505 also into 1503 because it's traffic control at an intersection as well.
okay,
This seems like a happier home for that. But then the remaining question was, should we put 1509, which is no right turn on red, just a turn restriction, also in this section, or just leave it on its own? Because it's not really a right-of-way control kind of thing. It's just a prohibition.
I mean, it's just placement of the same language in a different section, right?
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, do you have a preference?
I don't have a strong preference, and neither does our assistant city attorney. My first thought was, well, it only applies at signalized intersections. There's no right turn on red away from signalized intersections. And I think the flip argument to that is, well, we do have other turn restrictions at intersections that wouldn't fall under this because they're more expansive. They're not limited only to intersections, like no U-turns. So he could go either way, I could go either way. I thought, well, if the committee has a preference, we'll do it that way.
Anyone on the committee have a preference in this regard?
I have a slight preference to stick with what's before us, I guess. This is Robert, by the way. So I think it's fine to leave something as 15.09 right turn restrictions or something, leave it at 15.09 or wherever it is. And just vote to recommend this ordinance change.
as it's written here.
as written, correct?
Yeah.
Anyone else have a preference? Seems to be kind of 6 of one and half dozen of the other.
Yeah, well, in that case, I can appreciate less work is probably better. It's not causing trouble the way it is.
All right, anyone else have any thoughts or opinions on this subject?
What would be easier to maintain down the road, Sean, in your opinion?
We don't
As far
make
as
a
document
ton
maintenance?
of, yeah, we don't make a ton of changes to any of these. So I don't know that one's easier than the next.
Okay.
Anyone like to suggest
Well,
a
I
motion
would
on
make
this
a motion.
subject?
This is Robert. I would make a motion to recommend amendment of this ordinance to for traffic control designations at various intersections. I recommend that to I guess
Usually
the
L and O and the council. Yeah, usually we go to L and O and council on these.
L&O and council then, yes. That
It
would
did
be my
occur to me, I
recommendation.
forgot to write a recommendation for the committee, so I apologize for that.
No, it's all good.
All right. We have a motion. Is there a second to Robert's motion?
This is Susan, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation of the License and Ordinance Committee and the council. Okay,
Next up is an issue about our railroad spur in the industrial park.
Yeah,
Every
this
now
one
and
was
then-
this one was very interesting.
Yeah, but never in a good way. When someone says industrial park, it's never good news. Every now and then, that railroad, just needs maintenance. It needs significant maintenance, but every now and then the railroad company themselves get on us and say, stuff is approaching dangerous out here and you need to do something. And then they usually give us a list of suggestions and we talk it over with contractors and they corroborate it and say, yeah, we really ought to do this and this and this. So what we have is a pretty hefty price tag on some work that really needs to happen. But they did help us find a way to start small and shoot for next year's budget instead of this year's budget. That they'll say they can keep operations going if we can replace some ties and get the rail held back together again. But in the pretty near future, we're going to need to do a lot more work.
John, how long has this railroad spur been in existence?
That was in the early 70s that it was built as part of the Middleton Development Corporation, I think it was. Middleton Area Development Corporation, MADC, started that. And they put in this industrial park with a spur. And the idea being that it was going to have, I think, 4 or 5 turnouts that receiving industries then would want to build an enterprise out in the industrial park and make use of rail service. Only 2 are still using rail. Future Foam uses it quite a lot, but Hall Lumber uses it only a little bit, is my understanding. And nobody on the west side uses it anymore.
There was no sunset date, obviously, as to when the city's responsibility for maintaining it ended, and it may have been taken over by the businesses that use it.
No, it was intended that the rail spur itself would be public and rather than by association or something. And the turnouts themselves and the siding tracks would be owned by the industries. So a lot of the really expensive stuff is turnouts because there's so many moving pieces and rail that has to fit just right to get a train to move to a siding track. So all of that work we have to do because it's on the main line, but then we bill it back to the receiving industries to say, it's your turnout. But the 1,300 feet of industrial spur is us. So
Are there turnouts on a locations not actively used?
there are.
How are those covered?
We still send them a bill for their turnout, even though they're not using it, because the option always has been presented as either fix what's there or undertake a project to take your turnout
Take your spur out. Yeah.
out of our main line and put rail right through it.
Yep.
Any other discussion or questions on this item?
I guess this phase one, I guess my question is, it sounds like it's the Band-Aid to just keep things running for a short period of time. Is not that this is really an option to move ahead now, but how much is this Band-Aid costing us extra than if I could give you a check today, which I can't, that said, let's just go right to the permanent fix. Do we know how much extra the Band-Aid is costing us versus just going right to a permanent fix? Is there a cost savings by doing this now, or is it's still a net additional cost, but it's not maybe the full, $25,000 spent this year, 20,000 of it is still useful to the work they're eventually going to do. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. Is there any story you can tell me that money spent now this year not only keeps it running, but also basically can be applied to next year's potential expenses?
Sure, which is a good question. I don't have unit prices on these 5 items of work that
Sure.
have this oddly specific dollar figure associated with it. So those figures exist. I don't have them yet. But I will say, in a general sense, replacing 35 ties between Highway 14 and University Green, and then another 35 ties north of University Green, that's not wasted effort. We need new ties anyway, where they're routed out. So that'll be fine. It's the respiking or lagging the rail to those ties that essentially has to get redone in the next year anyway.
Okay.
And tightening and replacing missing bolts has to get redone. Removing scrap is a freebie that costs almost nothing. So I would say the lion's share of the cost is still in materials we do get to keep and reuse. In fact, in future years, we have to replace a bunch more ties. But whatever work it is to put the rail back down and try to hold it in place with spikes, that's wasted effort. That's what we're hoping lasts maybe a year or so.
I think that's a fair answer, and thank you very much.
Is there any cost saving to be realized by doing all of the work at once rather than having the contractor come in with equipment and crews in 2 separate small packages?
There's gonna be some because of the mobilization. Just to get somebody to show up costs something. So if they could just replace half the ties instead of a piece of ties and then another piece of ties, then they wouldn't have to show up with that equipment again. But it's not materially going to change the overall price per tie. It's just going to be that lump sum of mobilization that gets sort of duplicated. I do think that we could and probably should combine phases 2 and 3 so that after we replace the rest of the ties, try to replace some broken rail and badly worn rail, that we go ahead and surface the whole thing right away.
But is it correct, Sean, that if we do not do phase 1 this year, like now, it's not like we can just kick the can down the road. If we don't do it this year, there's basically, they might say, well, then this is decommissioned or something, this spur.
At the point where they determine that it's unsafe, yeah, then they're bound to put stop orders on that and just basically lock it out. They're not allowed to roll on it until something's fixed, which you know, comes to us in the form of customer complaints, then like Future Foam will say, well, great, now how am I supposed to get all my chemicals delivered? And that's happened once where the railroad was worried about derailment, and they said, you know, neither one of us wants to be there when we tip over a loaded chemical car. And I believe them.
I
But
definitely believe them. I don't want it. I don't want that to happen under my watch either. So,
but it's hard to say, you know, what day that is. If it's going to be this year or if it's going to be just into next year, I don't know. But what they're telling us is the significant worry on their part is that our curve from Highway 14 up to University Green is getting wide enough that their concern is sooner than later they're going to drop a car between the rails, and that's when they tip over. So they go really, really slow, but they're just not convinced that we're in okay shape right now.
yeah, based on my reading of this, I feel like phase one does need to happen sooner rather than later. So I would make the motion to recommend that phase one be recommended to Finance Committee and Common Council for this year, and that, you know, when finance can figure out where the rest of the money comes from, we can talk about a phase two and phase three. But I would recommend phase one to Finance Committee and Common Council now.
And is that with a budget transfer from the Middleton Beach Road design or just?
Yeah, I guess, let me take
that.
How does it affect Middleton Beach Road projects?
It shouldn't.
Number one, I don't know if there's, you know, the potential that we're going to have missed something significant in the scope of work and then have to go borrowing from a different project. But as it stands right now, we have some funding set up where we could get additional soil borings. We have old soil borings already, and my hope is we could just augment that with some limited newer information. But it's a project just beginning. The good news is, I think with our ongoing road construction projects, if it turns out we need a little money in one project, we might be able to realize a surplus in other projects. Have a fair degree of confidence in that. So which line item it comes out of doesn't worry me too much right now. We may have to shuffle a few shells later too. You know,
Well, the railroad spur is the highest risk thing we're talking about here, so.
it does seem to me a much higher downside than resurfacing if it comes to that.
Okay, so yeah, my full motion is to recommend to Finance Committee and Common Council a budget transfer of $25,000 from the capital fund account for the Middleton Beach Road design, because we think it has that money available to fund this phase one of the railroad industrial spur maintenance.
Okay.
All right, is there a second to Robert's motion?
This is Carrie. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item or on Robert's motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that is what we will recommend to the Finance Committee and the council.
All right. Then we have our spring newsletter. And this is in the, I'll call it the new format. It's in a Word format instead of a publisher software. So that's one of the things the committee had asked for last fall, just to make everything sort of clean and streamlined and not in little boxes with hyphens all over the place. So we took a lot of this.
Considerably easier to read.
Yeah, I thought it was good too.
I
Well,
thought
I
it was
could appreciate that. And frankly, it's easier to edit this way too.
right. That's where
Anybody.
I think it's huge to edit that way. I still say some of the little iconography or pictures or whatever, clip art, whatever that we used to have could still be fitted in here someplace if it was helpful. Certainly sometimes newsletters benefit from not just being a wall of words. But I do appreciate the fact that this is now an editable document and the last ones were not. My only comment, other than the possible benefit of adding some clip art back in, it seems like we always get these things a month after leaf collection.
Yeah.
It says, hey, we want you guys to vote on this or make a recommendation, and we're always getting this, and it says, oh yeah, last month we were telling people to do this. Is there ever a chance that it makes sense that we get these 3 weeks before a spring leaf collection or something like that?
Yeah, that was high on my list too now. So I'm just setting an Outlook calendar myself. The person who had an Outlook calendar set, without getting into detail, had a significant health issue and prolonged absence. And so despite good intentions, it just didn't work at all. So
that's fair.
We're going to double up on that.
It's a want, not a need. So I like this format. And like I said, I think in the future, we might be able to bring back a few little lines and clip art to make it not just be 5 pages of text. But I do fully support the fact that it is now in an editable Word document where, oh, there is a picture.
I left this one in.
Yay!
I had a comment. I was wondering if there's a way to kind of have this is like electronic, right, Sean?
It is. It's in Word.
Yeah. So I was wondering if there's a way to kind of have kind of like a table of contents in the beginning. I don't think you need it for this newsletter, but maybe for the fall, where people can just see what they're interested in and just click it, and then it hyperlinks to that section of the article. Because I think it would be nice to kind of have some kind of a overview of like, oh, what's in this article at the beginning. If it, as long as it doesn't make it too cumbersome or long, but maybe for the fall, that might be something to explore. Because
Sean,
then if someone's interested in brush collection, they can just click on that and then it takes them down to the brush collection section.
And I don't know enough about it, but I bet somebody can.
And I'd be happy to help. I'd be happy to help with that.
Yeah.
Oh, you're like
Sean,
a word
this is-
wizard. I'm
Sean,
going to
this
write
is
that
being-
down.
This is being sent out by mail, correct?
No, it used to be, but we now just put it on our website.
Okay, then that makes sense. I think when it's converted to a PDF, that can be done.
Yeah, it can.
Okay.
When would the intention be, after this gets approved, to send it out?
Oh, tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Are we already finished with leaf collection for this year? I mean, it says starting April 1st and running through the month.
We are for, I'm sorry. For those of you with vertigo, shield your eyes. Yeah, so exactly. And that was Robert's point is, this is not timely.
Well, it's not timely for the committee to look at it, but then you're sending it out to the public and you're telling them, this is
You're
what
too
we
late.
did. Yeah, you're too late. If you want to get anything out, it's too late. Would it make sense for this one to perhaps say curbside collection of leaves and yard waste ended on April 30th?
And
For
we'll resume in
leaf
fall?
collection process, whatever. This is what the process will be. I mean, it just always seems to me a little strange to be sending stuff out to the general public on something that is already ended and they can do nothing about at this point.
Sean, since
That's a fair point.
since this is online, why can't the whole thing be online and simply updated as needed without having to do the, like leaf collection, and then have under that topic spring and fall? with the times and just get updated each year appropriately.
And you wouldn't have to have a specific newsletter.
Right,
Well,
but this would be online as the newsletter always, and less confusing to citizens.
Yeah, I might have to check with DNR. A big reason that this exists, and even though we've started adding other departments and other stuff to it, is that as having a recycling program, if we get a grant from the DNR every year.
Okay,
One of the rules of that is that we're going to have public outreach via a newsletter effectively that we'll send to people.
Okay.
So
Well,
I think if it's just on the website, but we're not sort of periodically sending it to people, that it may not count.
Not only that, I would say, this time, one, there was a big formatting changes that changes the way it looks completely. So I'm glad it came to us this time. And secondly, if we don't get forced to look at this twice a year, spring and fall, my guess is it would go out into a website. Even if that was allowed, it would sit out there and languish, and all of a sudden we'd 3 to 10 years later, we'd go, oh my goodness, look, we haven't looked at this in years. And so I don't mind it coming back to us.
Robert, the point is we're sending this out with spring leaf collection already over.
I agree with what
And that we've got to get fixed. So if we
Yes.
have just leaf collection for people to look up online with both spring and fall, that gives them all the information they need to really understand it.
Well, hopefully you can get the fall one out in a more timely manner so that it's ahead of the time when the leaf collection actually is taking place. And I thought that by doing what I suggested might be a little bit of a dodge for this time that just doesn't make the city look like it's that far behind the curve that we didn't think about getting this out to you until a month after the leaf collection ended.
Right. Could we at least add a little sentence, fall leaf collection will start on this date?
Yeah, I think
The
that's what I
rules stay the
heard.
same.
Yeah. Say fall leaf collection will start at this date and here are the rules for it.
Yeah.
Well, you don't even, and the rules are the same as the spring.
Right.
So I think
Right.
what you could do is just, instead of the heading spring leaf collection, it would just be leaf collection.
Leaf
Just remove the
collection.
word spring. And then I think,
Mhm.
Bob, I agree with your edits that it said, spring leaf collection ended April 30th. Fall will start whenever, whatever you had said, Bob. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
So
that's
too.
nice. That's nice because then we also keep all of the language that's here. We don't delete it and then go looking in the file and say, oh, where was that language again? Oh, we deleted it. We leave it all in here with just a little change at the lead-in paragraph to say, spring leaf collection ended April 30th, fall begins this date, and then all the rest of the information stays here exactly. So I like that a lot. And yeah, I think we should do that. I also liked Carrie's idea of a hyperlink table of contents at the beginning in the future. Not something I would recommend for this newsletter this time around.
Okay.
I have 2 other little putsy edits too, Sean, if you could go back to the recycling portion of this.
Sure.
There, you just went by one. Go back up, stop right there. Under the bullet points, televisions, computers, desktop printers, the part in parentheses says including those can scan. Shouldn't there be a that in there?
Well, it would read better.
I told you it was putsy.
We're going to use English, I suppose.
That would be, I think English is good.
All right.
All right, and I had one other thing that I thought was a little bit confusing. When you say in this last paragraph, many electronics recyclers will also accept, that's including the Middleton Recycling Center, isn't it? Because up above, you say what the Middleton Recycling Center will accept.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it makes sense to say many electronics recyclers, including the Middleton Recycling Center, also accept other types of electronics. And then you want to make it clear that these items, televisions, computers, desktop, printers, monitors, that's all stuff that is accepted by the Middleton Recycling Center, correct?
I believe so. I know some of that has changed, but I think yes, that we still collect.
But
or will
I just thought it would be
accept all
helpful
of
to
this.
say, our recycling center accepts these things, and many electronics recyclers, including ours, accept these other things as well, just to make sure that all of this stuff that we're talking about can be taken out to our Middleton Recycling Center.
Yeah, I think this is all still on our list. Yep. So I can add that. That's a good catch.
Okay, that's
The only thing the recycling center doesn't accept broken TVs. So maybe we want to say something like
Oh,
some kind of caveat of like the Middleton Recycling Center collects these, I don't know, something per their guidance, or you know what I mean? Like kind of saying something that.
What do you mean by broken, Carrie?
Yeah, is that the broken tube, or is that just a
I don't
TV that doesn't work?
If the thing
I don't know. I
doesn't
just
work,
looked it up to see, and it just says no broken TVs will be accepted.
Yeah, I
That-
think
that
that
means like
was
a broken
broken
screen?
CRT tube.
Yeah.
But
because of the lead in there. Yeah.
yeah.
Sean, I think we need some statements about these two things, Middleton Recycling Center and Trash and Recycling Guide, to indicate what information is in those links. Because the Trash and Recycling Guide, as I remember, gave a very detailed list of how to recycle all sorts of things throughout the whole county, where you could go take them. And then Middleton Recycling Center would have just what we would accept.
Yes, that's right.
And I think we need explanation for people to go to those two links.
What sort of explanation would you like?
As to what's actually in them,
Well, I
I
think that
don't
might
get
get
that sense from the
extensive.
paragraph before. Something saying information about where to recycle all sorts of trash is in this trash and recycling guide. Someone that's first reading this for the first time won't realize we have a trash and recycling guide. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. I was hoping it was intuitive that to click on the link, you would see what's in there.
Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
I agree. We could add a sentence just before we have those links. And I do note that Rick, and I'll probably slaughter your last name, Rick Eilertson, has both of his hands raised, his electronic hand and his real hand.
All right.
Yeah, if you don't mind me, so I actually helped put together the Fitchburg Recycling Guide that then I worked with Middleton Sustainability Committee to craft the current Middleton Trash and Recycling Guide. We actually worked on that probably about 10 plus years ago.
I probably worked with you on it.
Yep.
Because I did that one.
Yep. So even though there are references around the county, it is Middleton specific. My suggestion would be just to list the Middleton. List the Middleton Trash and Recycling Guide, because that has all the items listed that are there. The Middleton Recycling Center, is listed under certain appropriate items. But just to keep things simple for the reader. And if there's interest, I can send a link to Fitchburg's Green E-News Blast that goes out generally a monthly basis, but that format is very similar to what Carrie was suggesting, with just having bulleted items. Basically there's a list of anywhere from 4 to 10 different topics that are highlighted, and then a brief paragraph is in the PDF document that gets pulled up, and then the PDF document has hyperlinks to go where, to find additional information. So that's one potential format that you could consider. It would be relatively easy to do even for this edition, but it could also wait to a future edition. So thank you anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, I
Okay.
agree. Combining that into one single link is less confusing.
Yeah, I like that
Okay.
idea because then we don't have to worry about exactly what we're putting in this list and to make sure we have everything. Because then if the trash and recycling guide is updated, it's just one place that needs to be updated, I guess.
All right, thank you. Any further questions, comments with respect to the?
Yeah, can we go to, this is Carl, can we go to the first paragraph, please? It basically says, please see Pellettieri's memo. I guess I was looking for the memo. I'm not sure what that references.
Oh, yeah, that was supposed to have had a link, I think.
I mean, it doesn't show, I mean, it's a link to their website, but there is no memo
down-
on their website.
Yeah, down here it's a link to their website, but up here I think it was supposed to have been a link to Pellettieri's memo itself. I think it was
Okay.
supposed to have been a link. Let me look into that and see once what happened.
All right, any further comments, committee members?
Overall, I think this looks good. I mean, yeah, we're talking tweaks. I think the basic memo here sorry, spring newsletter is overall good. And if we can get a couple of tweaks in this newsletter, great. If some of these things don't get improved upon until fall, I think we could live with that too. So I would make a motion that, to the best of your ability, Sean, to put in some of the tweaks we discussed today, I would make a motion that we recommend, or actually, this one, are we just approving?
Yeah, this would just be authorization or direction to publish it to the website.
Yeah, I think time is of the essence. If we can make a couple of those tweaks, especially like about the leaf collection for this one, I would say make those quick changes. Anything else you can do, and then I would make a motion to authorize the release or printing of the spring newsletter on the website.
All right.
Is there a second to Robert's motion?
This is Dan, I will
Susan, I'll
second.
second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the newsletter? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and Sean, you can proceed to tweak it and then publish it.
Okay.
Looks much better this time, and to my eye, than it did before, so.
Yeah, it was getting a little
Work was
busy.
done on it.
It's a significant improvement.
Agreed.
Good.
Okay,
So that's all we had on our agenda for tonight.
This is
Carrie.
Robert. This
Go ahead.
is Robert. Motion to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
This is Carrie, I'll second.
All right, a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we stand adjourned until next time. Sean, I would like to ask you a question or two after the meeting is over, if that is a possibility.
Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Guys,
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.